Welcome to the realm of science fiction, where imagination knows no bounds and extraordinary stories unfold. Enjoy the adventure.
The shuttle trembled as it pierced the upper layers of Kah'Thera Prime's atmosphere. Outside the reinforced viewport, the sky was ablaze molten orange clouds, roiled like boiling dye, laced with jagged auroras that twisted across the firmament, like serpents made of light. Magnetic turbulence from the volcanic vents below shimmered against the hull, warping the world beyond into a kaleidoscope of heat and shadow. Jonah Wexley leaned forward, forehead nearly touching the glass. His breath fogged the edge, unnoticed. The Tyr'shai homeworld was more alive than any landscape he'd seen, like a planet caught mid-battle with itself. Lava rivers pulsed across the surface like arteries. Spires of black stone jutted from scorched plains. And nestled in the deepest caldera was the shining heart of it all, the capital fortress city, Kah'Thera jewel of the warrior caste. The shuttle's AI intoned the altitude, but Jonah wasn't listening. He wasn't prepared. Official briefings hadn't captured this. The photos, the scrolls, the simulation renders, they were all grayscale shadows of what now unfolded before him. It wasn't just another alien world. It was sacred ground, living myth, and he was descending into the center of it with a diplomatic badge and a mispronounced greeting phrase. They said the Tyr'shai were unyielding, that they spoke in symbols and silence, that a misplaced word could be mistaken for a challenge. Jonah had laughed when he first heard that. Now, the laughter had been replaced with dry-mouthed awe, because as the shuttle's legs touched obsidian ground, Jonah realized he wasn't stepping into a city. He was stepping into a proving ground, and he was the first human allowed to enter. The reception chamber echoed with silence. Words had been spoken, but none dared repeat them. Not yet. Not until meanings layered, interlocked, and sharpened with intent had time to settle like ash in still air. Jonah stood at the center of the stone-clad floor, heart thudding beneath the ceremonial folds of his diplomatic garb. Before him stood 6 Tyr'shai dignitaries, each cloaked in metallic fiber, their helms ornately marked with lineage runes that shifted subtly under the hall's light. Not a single expression could be read. Not a breath could be trusted. He had offered them a gift, an earth-forged dagger carved from meteorite, and inset with obsidian shards. He'd thought it poetic, a gesture of peace stone to stone, sky to fire. But the Tyr'shai word he used, Vartun, could mean offering, or blood right, or worse, marital bedding. They had frozen. Then one leaned forward, gaze heavy beneath her helm, and said only, "You speak boldly for one with no clan." He had studied their language for years, but it wasn't just about syntax or phonemes. Tyr'shai speech was a ritual dance of timing, tone, and silence. Every pause was a test. Every syllable was a blade, and Jonah had walked in swinging. Commander Veyna Kar'Sharr stood still, her armor gleaming with veins of molten thread like lava caged beneath steel. Her posture was silent dominance, her presence a blade drawn, but not yet swung. Jonah offered a respectful nod, careful not to bow. He'd memorized enough protocol to know the difference between deference and insult. Her eyes didn't move. Her face held no welcome, only scrutiny. A warrior weighing metal before the duel. He mistook the silence for dislike, misread the distance as disdain. The armor, the glare, the tightness of her jaw, it all spelled contempt to a diplomat untrained in Tyr'shai restraint. But beneath that unflinching gaze, Veyna studied him not as a threat, but as a puzzle. A creature that had breached sacred space with neither arrogance nor awareness. She didn't hate the human. She hated the fact that, in the space of 5 seconds, he hadn't flinched. And now she couldn't look away. Flames licked upward from the stone table. Hearth as meats hissed and aromatic roots boiled in black iron bowls. The room glowed with volcanic light, cast by magma-fed torches inlaid with silver. Rune channels. Honor feasts were not common, especially not with outsiders. Jonah was seated beside Veyna, the seat of shared breath. He took it as progress. Her silence, to him, felt permissive. Acceptance, even. His nerves danced somewhere, between awe and relief. When the moment came, he rose to speak, glass in hand, tone sincere. "To our hosts," he said, "may understanding burn brighter than fear, and curiosity light the path between stars." The room shifted. Utensils paused midair. A few elders lowered their gaze. Veyna turned slowly. Unbeknownst to Jonah, his exact phrasing delivered with open palms and steady eyes. mirrored an ancient Tyr'shai bond oath, a declaration made once in a warrior's life to invite another into blood-aligned kinship. It was a rite never performed lightly. No one corrected him. No one explained. Not yet. But as Veyna stared at the man who had just pledged allegiance without knowing, one thought took root like fire in dry bark. He doesn't even know the war, he just started. The door slid open without ceremony. Inside, the chamber glowed dimly with ambient light pulled from the volcanic flow beneath the palace floors. Battle murals were etched along obsidian wall, stories of ancestral rites, victories, and oaths sealed in fire. In the center of the room lay a vast, sunken bed carved from a single block of onyx. Upon its surface rested a ceremonial cloth etched with the symbol of House Kar'Sharr. Jonah blinked at it, then smiled. The room was breathtaking, grand but not gaudy, intimate yet respectful. A high honor, he thought. His guides hadn't said, much only that these quarters had been prepared personally. He removed his outer coat, folded it neatly, and lowered himself into the bed's cratered embrace. The obsidian was warm, its heat regulated by flowing geothermal veins beneath. His body, still sore from the journey, gave in. Eyes fluttered, breath slowed. Sleep took him before he questioned anything. He didn't see the shrine carved into the far wall, didn't recognize the sigils for what they were, blood-bound inheritance, markers. He never wondered why no other rooms in the corridor were occupied. Jonah Wexley slept in a place where only warriors of lineage were allowed. And in doing so, crossed the most sacred line of all. The sharp clack of armored boots struck the stone before the light ever changed. A mechanical hiss split the silence as the chamber door opened. Warm air rushed inward. Veyna stood there, flanked by two guards, eyes wide with disbelief and fury, held back only by millimeters of control. Jonah stirred, groggy, muttering a greeting. Then he saw them, the glint of drawn blades, the stiffness in the guards' postures. Veyna's clenched jaw. He sat up slowly, palms lifted. Wait, is there a problem? They didn't answer. Not at first. Veyna stepped forward, eyes locked to the imprint on the bed's center, still warm, still radiating human scent. The cloth had shifted, revealing one of the sacred house sigils half crushed beneath his arm. It was enough. A sharp command in Tyr'shai sent the guards moving. Ritual circles were drawn. An archive drone activated overhead, recording the incident. Jonah's confusion deepened by the second. The crime was done, though he hadn't yet seen its edges. To the Tyr'shai, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was desecration. It was kinship claimed by trespass. And before the sun rose higher over the molten horizon, the council would demand blood, bond, or exile. The Council of Blades convened by noon. Veyna stood at the center of the circle, her voice steady but hollow. She recounted the facts. The unauthorized presence in a sanctified forest, the violation of sacred symbology, the implied claim of kinship. Every word landed with ceremonial weight, reinforced by archaic law and centuries of tradition. There were no raised voices, no accusations. Only truths, each sharper than a blade. Jonah listened, numb, eyes darting between faces carved from stone and steel. His translator drone buzzed softly, struggling to keep up with the formal dialect. He caught only fragments. Lineage breached. Intent unclear. Response required. The council offered two paths. First, the right of challenge, a duel to restore Veyna's honor, fought under open flame, blood drawn before all. Second, the honor token, a gift of contrition, deeply personal, forged with humility and meaning. A gesture that must speak louder than trespass. Neither option was simple. One required skill Jonah didn't have. The other, wisdom he wasn't sure he could conjure. And across the chamber, Veyna watched him not with hatred, but with something worse. Expectation. Because now, he wasn't just the alien. He was the one who had broken a sacred code and was still breathing. You have bedded the war, mother, the translator drone whispered. Jonah froze. The drone recalculated. Clarification? You have lain in the place reserved only for blood-bound kin. Apology or blood must follow. Jonah's throat dried. He stammered something, anything to fix the breach. The words he chose, desperate and misaligned, happened to match Anan. Old Tyr'shai deferral phrase, used in bonding ceremonies. I meant no claim, only to learn if the fire was real. The council leaned forward. Veyna's breath caught in that moment. Jonah did not diffuse the ritual. He ignited it, and the path he'd stumble down would be written in fire. The ceremonial gongs rang out like thunder trapped in brass bones. Their echoes rolled through the volcanic corridors, each note vibrating with judgment. The signal was ancient, used only when tradition demanded reckoning. Jonah, still groggy and half-dressed, was marched beneath the burning crystal dome of the Grand Assembly Hall. Light from molten rivers refracted above, casting shadows that danced across the stone pillars etched with battles and betrayals long past. The Council of Blades sat in silence. 12 voices of power, their helms fused with ancestral metals, their bodies unmoving beneath armor, designed not for war, but for remembrance. At the center sat the High Matron, flanked by elders with eyes sharp enough to carve shame from silence. Jonah's boots scraped the floor. His translator drone hovered close, its tones quiet, mechanical, and inadequate. He was placed at the center of the obsidian disk, a symbol of disputed ground. One step forward, acceptance. One back, refusal. For now, he stood still, not knowing either would save him. Veyna stood nearby, not speaking, not even looking. The hall remained silent. The gravity wasn't just metaphorical. It was designed to press down, to test resolve with literal weight. Jonah's knees ached, then a voice rang out from the throne's side. Explain your trespass. Human. The trial had begun, not with weapons, but with fire in their voices. And he had no armor to wear but words. Counselor Verne rose, old even by Tyr'shai standards. His presence radiated tradition, so heavily it could smother the uninitiated. His voice was deep gravel, dragged across blade edge. The human speaks as if unaware. Yet the warist was marked, clearly. Does Earth teach its kin to read without meaning? Jonah took a breath, then another. I didn't know. It wasn't intentional. I thought it was a guest chamber prepared for. Laughter rippled through the council. Not mirth, scorn. Verne waved a hand. Intent is the blade's sheath. The wound cares not. The drone translated, pausing awkwardly on the last phrase. Jonah tried again. He explained his sleep-deprived state, the lack of signage, the lack of guards, every word tumbling out like gravel down a slope. But the more he spoke, the heavier the room became. He realized too late. They weren't listening for explanation. They were weighing response to the Tyr'shai. Every phrase carried ritual. To offer reason without reverence, to defend without deference, it wasn't humility. It was evasion. And silence in this room had meaning. When he paused, when he looked at Veyna for support and found only steel in her eyes. The judgment settled unspoken. He had entered without blade, without shield, without bow. But to the council, he had declared war. All the same. Eyes turned toward her. Not one, not two, but all 12 members of the council. The High Matron leaned forward. Will you now declare the challenge, Veyna of Kar'Sharr? Her name echoed like metal dropped onto hot stone. In Tyr'shai tradition, once invoked aloud in the court, it demanded response. To say nothing was to kneel before accusation. To answer carelessly was to sever one's bloodline from honor. Jonah saw her shoulders straighten, but she didn't. Speak, not yet. She knew the path. If she defended him, her own lineage would bear the stain of weakness of sentiment. If she challenged him, she would legitimize the trespass, elevate it into ritual, and potentially push Earth and Kah'Thera into hostile deadlock. To say nothing was safer, but the council would interpret it as indecision. And indecision was as dangerous as insult. Jonah didn't understand all of it, but he understood her hands, tightly clenched beneath her cloak. A subtle tremble in her left wrist. Not from fear, but conflict. This wasn't about alien politics anymore. It was about a woman bound by a culture that didn't allow mercy. About a soldier torn between protocol and instinct. She could strike, she could protect, but she could not do both and remain whole. Before either could move, a new voice stirred the chamber deeper than Verne's, older than even the matrons. It came from the far side of the ring, where the air shimmered from hidden heat vents. A figure stepped forward, staff in hand. Elder Satal, historian, warrior, keeper of exceptions. The warist was entered. That is truth. But no blood was drawn. That is also truth. So let the trial be the bridge. Murmurs rippled through. The council. Satal approached the center. His cloak carried glyphs of 100 battles, but his eyes spoke not of war but memory. He faced the matron. Then Veyna, then Jonah. The honor trial, he said. Not of blood, but of measure. Let the human prove intention, not by strength, but by insight. Jonah barely followed until his translator clicked into clarity. A non-lethal challenge. A ritual combining cultural riddles, martial poise, and symbolic performance. Each test was ancient, meant to judge truth of spirit, not dominance of flesh. It had not been invoked in generations. Veyna gave no response, but did not object. Jonah bowed his head. He didn't know the rules, didn't even know the shape of the path ahead. But he understood one thing. This was the only road that didn't end in blood, and it would be walked under every eye, every judgment, and every expectation this world could muster. The chamber where she found him was quiet. No guards, no witnesses. Only the distant hum of energy conduits running beneath the stone. Veyna approached like a storm on slow feet. Her voice cut first. "You are a fool." Jonah didn't respond. The air was thick with something beyond anger. "You sleep where no outsider has ever stood," she continued, "and you speak as if you understand our fire. You don't. You nearly ignited a war with a toast." Then silence, long, pressurized, measured. "I don't want to fight you," she finally said. The words fell like cooled steel, still heavy, but no longer burning. Her gaze dropped briefly. Just once. No outsider has lasted more than one day in Kah'Thera without running. You don't even know what you've done. But you're still here. Jonah saw it then, not just the threat behind her stance, but the pattern behind the chaos. The layers of ritual, the weight of gestures, the codes unspoken yet ever present. The Tyr'shai weren't lawless. They were bound by threads so ancient and intricate, only those willing to bleed could learn to weave them. Jonah wasn't brave. Not yet. But now, for the first time, he wasn't blind. The diplomatic wing smelled like sterilized air and burning. Decisions. Jonah stood before the Earth envoy, a graying official who looked less like a diplomat and more like a funeral planner. "You can leave," the man said. "The Tyr'shai will accept your withdrawal as personal shame, not Earth's failing. The Council has signaled their willingness to let you go quietly." Jonah stared past him through the crystalline viewport. Outside, Kah'Thera's twin moons had risen, one crimson, the other pale silver. They circled like twin eyes watching. From above, he thought about Veyna's clenched fists, about the fire etched into every wall of this planet, about the line he had crossed without knowing, and the one he now had to walk willingly. They'll see it as weakness, the ambassador added, or strategy. Either way, the accord will fracture. You're just a translator, Jonah, not a martyr. He turned. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped out of the chamber and made his way down the spiral corridor toward the ceremonial pit. His legs shook, but his spine didn't. He had learned the Tyr'shai word for courage the night before. It didn't mean strength, or fearlessness. It meant standing in fire and staying long enough to learn the shape of your own shadow. The news spread faster than flame on dry stone. Within hours, every major orbital station in Tyr'shai space had redirected communication arrays. Psychic relays pulsed with encrypted anticipation. Holoscreens flashed one image across 3 systems. The human who had slept in a forest and now dared face the trial of flame. For the Tyr'shai, it was spectacle. It had not been invoked in over 100 cycles. Even scholars who had memorized the rite had never seen it lived. It was symbolic resurrection, an ancient code made flesh. For Earth, it was survival. Trade accords, diplomatic postings, future contact permissions, everything hinged on one human proving that intention could be as sacred as tradition. Jonah sat in the prep chamber, dressed in ceremonial robes stitched with borrowed sigils. Every rune was a question he didn't yet know how to answer. He flexed his hands. The cloth whispered with each movement. His palms still carried the warmth of the pendant Veyna had pressed into them. Not as forgiveness, not yet, but as a weight outside. Tyr'shai crowds gathered in the temple plaza. Inside, oracle drones aligned themselves in perfect formation. Every breath he took echoed in relay. The trial would be composed of 3 tests: language, motion, memory. Each designed not to break the body, but to reveal the soul. Jonah wasn't a soldier, but he had a voice. And for the first time in recorded history, a Tyr'shai honor trial would be broadcast to both sides of the stars. Elder Satal wore no helm, no weapon. Only his scars. Lines crisscrossed his hands like cracked parchment, evidence of someone who had wielded both sword and sentence. Once a warrior, now a historian, his voice moved like cooled lava. Deliberate, slow, uncheckable. Jonah stood before Him in the ceremonial circle of interpretation, barefoot, exposed. The Tyr'shai do not speak to inform, Satal said. We speak to bind, to mark, to remember. He handed Jonah a ceremonial stave, not for combat, but for poise. Balance was part of speech here. Every tilt of the spine, every angle of the jaw dash language dot, and then the first duel began, not with weapons, but words, ritual call and response. Ancient maxims split by posture. Riddles offered in syntax meant to trap. Jonah flinched at the wrong. Pause, responded with too much certainty. Mistranslated a word that could mean dawn or death. Again, Satal said dot, again dot, and again dot. By the end of the session, Jonah was sweating through ceremonial linen. His calves ached from holding postures. His throat burned from recitations. But for every failure, Satal offered no correction only. Silence, expecting Jonah to find the flaw himself. Because this too was the Tyr'shai way. Correction was not a gift. It was earned dot by hour's end. Jonah's hands trembled from the strain, but his eyes didn't waver. The Garden of Trials was carved from cooled obsidian, polished to a sheen that reflected not just light, but history. Statues lined the edges, warriors. Caught in frozen duels, expressions stoic, weapons mid-arc. But they were more than art. Kinetic sensors embedded within each sculpture triggered challenges at random. Language fragments, pattern recognition, ritual gestures. Jonah entered alone dot at. First, nothing moved. Then the first statue spun. Arm extended in a test of reaction time. Jonah dodged too slowly. A rune flared red. The next demanded he answer a proverb with the correct reciprocal line. He fumbled the metaphor. Another read. He was struck lightly, harmlessly, but publicly. Each failure echoed against the gardens. Smooth walls, a whisper of shame in stone. But he didn't stop dot with each trial. He adjusted, took notes. Not just on the answers, but on rhythm, breath, timing. The weight of silence between prompts. He began to see the dance hidden beneath the assault. The Tyr'shai didn't want perfect answers. They wanted pattern, recognition under pressure. They wanted to see how he learned. And though the statues struck, again and again, by the seventh test, one rune flashed amber, dot not a pass, but no longer failure dot progress, written in firelight. Veyna watched from the gallery above, arms folded, face unreadable. She had not been asked to attend. She came anyway. Below, Jonah stumbled through the cadence drills. His footwork lagged behind his phrasing. He mispronounced an honorific that could have started a blood feud if said to a council elder. He caught it, corrected it, moved on, her jaw tightened dot not from anger, dot from memory dot. She had seen another outsider train here once. A Sultari envoy who smiled too easily, asked too many questions, charmed his way into Forbidden's libraries. He had praised their culture, said all the right things dot, and then sold everything he learned to a rival, Orklin on another moon. That had been 10 cycles ago dot. It was why she had built walls so high dot. It was why she spoke so little now. But this human didn't charm, didn't flatter. He just listened, endured, adapted, and beneath her armor, Veyna felt something dangerous. The first stirrings of curiosity she hadn't trusted in years. The weapon glyphs were ancient, not decorative, not linguistic. They were combat syntax phrases embedded in steel, capable of shifting meaning based on stance and movement. Wrong swing didn't just miss dot, it said the wrong thing. Jonah held the training blade in both hands. The glyph near the hilt pulsed faintly. Challenge. But as he moved, turning his foot at the wrong angle and lowering the point too fast, the meaning shifted mid-form. Now the blade said, claim. His sparring partner, an elder named Rital froze mid-motion. The room stilled. The implication hung in the air. Claim was not sparring language. It was mating language. Jonah lowered the blade immediately, but the damage, though mild, was noted. Rital nodded, slow and sharp, then resumed the drill without a word, but the rest of the onlookers had heard. Another whisper. Another mistake logged into the trial's compendium. Later, Satal reviewed the recording with Jonah. You spoke. Too quickly, he said. Jonah blinked. I didn't speak at all. You did, Satal replied, tapping the hilt rune. With your body, with your weight, with how you carried history. Jonah sat in silence for a long time. He had thought translation was about words. Now he knew. Here, everything was language, and he had a long way yet to speak it fluently. The circle of iron convened beneath layered veils of obsidian latticework, hidden from the public halls and ceremonial courts. Here, shadows moved with permission, and whispers were sharpened into policy. High Warlord Tarek leaned into the circle, one gauntlet tapping the iron-tiled table with steady rhythm. This is not error, it is insertion. A younger war priest raised an eyebrow. The human? A calculated play, Tarek growled. He entered the Warist, quoted an oath during feast. And now what? He is given a trial meant for kin? A right not invoked in 4 generations? Disgust hung on his tongue like ash. Another voice chimed in, silkier, more political. Or perhaps Veyna is the blade in motion. Her bloodline has long favored diplomacy. Perhaps she has softened. They nodded. If the trial succeeded, it would change everything. Rituals rewritten. Honor made malleable. The caste hierarchy questioned. They would not permit it. Not without conditions. Not without surveillance. And certainly not without backup plans already being sharpened behind. Closed doors. Because if a human could bend Tyr'shai tradition by accident, what might others do? On purpose? The message arrived coded, buried within a meditation scroll. Jonah hadn't touched since arrival. The translator drone decrypted it slowly, its voice unusually quiet. Immediate withdrawal authorized. Trial classified as political risk. The Council's motives are unknown. You are no longer required to participate. Signed, Earth Ambassador Rillen. Urgent seal. Level 7 override. Jonah read it 3 times. Sat in silence. Outside his chamber, Kah'Thera's twin moons painted molten shadows across the stone. Somewhere deep in the complex, ceremonial drums echoed a slow build toward the trial's first sequence. He held the message one more moment, then pressed his thumb to the delete rune. I started the fire, he whispered to himself, almost amused. Let me see what burns. No reply came, but the chamber felt warmer. Not from guilt or defiance, but from clarity. He wasn't just defending human diplomacy, no. He was defending the one thing more sacred than survival, the chance to be understood. Elder Satal met him in the arena of cracked basalt. No fanfare. No crowd. Just heat, stillness, and the sharp scent of old ash. You think with words, the elder said, handing him a blade marked with shifting glyphs. But Tyr'shai truth is forged in both speech, and scar. Jonah raised the blade. Satal didn't correct his form this time. The duel began. Fast, brutal, not sparring testing. Every angle of attack embedded a metaphor. Every block demanded grammatical precision. When Jonah leaned wrong, he misquoted a lineage. When he moved left instead of circling, he insulted a founding right. Sihil didn't hesitate to strike. Blunt edges met ribs. Legs, collarbone. Jonah stumbled, bleeding from the lip, breath ragged. He raised the blade again. And lost. Again. And again. Until something clicked. A shift not in his stance, but in rhythm. He stopped trying to speak through logic and started listening to weight. To breath. To the way the blade's edge moved like syllables carved in air. He responded without thinking, mirroring Satal's motion not to win, but to understand. The next strike he dodged, not with speed, but with symmetry. And Satal, for the first time, smiled. Not approval. Recognition. Not the ritual required silence. Under Kah'Thera's dusk, beneath flame-glow trees that pulsed with geothermal light, Jonah knelt opposite Veyna. Between them, the dream root burned a pale blue flame that consumed memory and returned only truth. Their foreheads touched the resonance. Stone. The link formed. The memory came unbidden. Cold water, screaming lungs, a lake on Earth long ago, 10 years old, pulled under, the weight of panic, the feel of water as a closing door. The moment breath stopped being a reflex and became a loss. Jonah did not fight the memory. He shared it, and Veyna saw it. She felt it in her chest, not the drowning, but the helplessness. The acceptance of finality. The surrender no Tyr'shai was ever trained to recognize. She flinched. The link pulsed again. Now her memory surged forward. A battlefield. A betrayal. The flash of a trusted ally turning blade against her line. Her scream, not of pain, but of disbelief. And Jonah saw her too. Neither spoke. Because in the dreamwalk, words were unnecessary. There was no diplomacy here. No misinterpretation. Only fear, grief, vulnerability stripped of posture. and for the first time since arriving on this burning world, Jonah felt something neither alien nor hostile. Shared silence. She found him later, by the obsidian pool. The trial was still hours away. But already, the world was watching. She approached without armor, without entourage. Just her voice. Just her truth. "You don't fear pain," she said quietly. Jonah looked up, but didn't speak. "You fear loss," she continued. "That's why you stayed. You've felt the moment something is taken from you, and you'd rather bleed than feel it again." There was no judgment in her tone, no fire. Only wait. "I don't know what you are yet," she added. "But you're not what I expected." Then she turned to leave, and as her footsteps echoed down the corridor, he realized she hadn't called him weak. She hadn't called him brave. She had called him something else, entirely known. The gates opened with the sound of cracking stone. Jonah stepped onto the obsidian causeway, the heat rising from the molten rivers below searing the soles of his ceremonial boots. Above him, the ceiling of the Temple of Coals shimmered, veins of red gold crystal glowing with the stored fury of 1,000 storms. He had studied Tyr'shai history in sterile archives. Now he stood at the heart of it. An amphitheater carved into ancient lava flows, shaped by ancestors who believed that truth must be spoken where fire still lives. The trial arena glowed from below, translucent crystal panels suspended above flowing magma. The platform pulsed with heat and judgment. Thousands of Tyr'shai watched in perfect silence. No cheers, no applause. Only breath held, ritual observed. Veyna stood on the opposite end of the arena, not as accuser, not as opponent, but as observer. This was not combat. This was reckoning. Every movement would be recorded. Every phrase tested. Every failure permanent. Jonah took his place in the center of the circle. The air was heavier here. The fire below did not burn skin, but expectation. He closed his eyes, inhaled the scent of ash and honor, and prepared. Because from this moment forward, every word might start a war or end one. The circle of elder linguists formed without announcement. 12 scholars stepped forward, each bearing scrolls woven from memory silk, each wearing helms of braided gold steel. Their eyes burned brighter than the lava below. One spoke first, her voice like sharpened parchment. "The tongue that binds can also blind. Speak. What breaks before it bends and heals only when cut?" Jonah exhaled. "Memory. Legacy. Or silence? Tradition?" he answered. The rune above his head shimmered amber neutral. Not wrong. Not full. A second elder stepped forward. His question curled like smoke. If the sky yields its fire, and the ground offers none, where is truth found? Jonah hesitated, then answered. Between. The rune turned silver. Then came the fourth. A high-born matriarch, ancient even by Tyr'shai standards, spoke in a language Jonah had only studied once. Archaic. Ceremonial. Intentionally ambiguous. What is the meaning of bedfire when lit by foreign hands? He paused. His translator HUMMED. 2 meanings. Desire or sacrifice. He chose too quickly. Desire. The rune flashed red. The matriarch blinked once. The crowd rustled, not a word spoken, but judgment whispered in breath. One more red, and the trial would end. But no gong sounded. No blade fell. Just a silence so deep it became a second chance. And Jonah, heart racing, bowed not in apology, but in humility. The trial moved on. But now, the arena watched not to see if he would succeed, but whether he had the right to continue. They handed him the staff of breath, a training weapon carved with runes that shimmered based on motion, not intent. Across from him stood a Tyr'shai, duelist named Veyna, taller by 2 heads, spine straight as a forged spear. The crowd did not cheer. The staff itself was the announcer. Its glow declared readiness. The bell tone rang. Veyna struck first. Jonah barely blocked in time, the shock vibrating down his arms. The staff hummed, its edge briefly flaring violet, a signal of poor balance. Not again. Again. Every swing Jonah made was met with precision. Every dodge was just shy of success. The arena began to murmur. A blade duel was more than muscle. It was rhythm, pattern, narrative made motion. But Jonah was flailing, until instinct took over. A memory surfaced training drills on Earth's lunar station. Lower gravity. Counterweight footwork. Jonah pivoted, slid under a strike, leapt just high enough and spun. Not with grace, but with timing. His staff caught Veyna's on the descent and redirected it, not with force, but with torque, Viharn stumbled. The crowd inhaled as one. Jonah didn't follow up. He didn't attack. He simply reset his stance and offered the staff again. The rune at its core glowed blue. Harmony. Not victory. But understanding. And for the first time, even the council elders leaned forward. Because the human didn't just survive the blade dance. He spoke its language. 2 chairs. 1 helm, crafted from resonance crystal harvested from the volcano's heart. The helm of unveiling linked minds through neural osmosis, allowing memories, emotion, instinct, and pain to pass between 2 beings without filter. Jonah sat in one, Veyna in the other. The ritual had no instruction, no rules. Only truth. The helm descended. And the world folded inward. Flashes, fire, snow, screams, a bed of stone, a brother's funeral, a girl's laughter, then the sound of breath being stolen. Jonah's childhood surfaced again. The drowning, his small fists pounding the lake's edge. The ache in his chest as lungs begged for mercy. And Veyna saw it. She saw powerlessness. A thing her people never permitted, never trained for. Then her memory opened. The battlefield. The betrayal. A comrade who had stood beside her for 7 cycles, turning his blade where her guard was lowered. Her scream a cry not of defeat, but of broken belief. Jonah didn't defend himself, didn't flinch. He reached into the emotional echo and wove something delicate, risky, sacred, a phrase. Spoken not aloud, but deep within the link. Your scars do not mar you. They map the ground we now stand on. It was poetry. Tyr'shai, poetic structure, repurposed, reframed. It wasn't apology. It was recognition. The helm lifted. Neither spoke. The arena did not erupt. No roar. No silence. Just stillness. Until the matron stood and spoke one word. Enough. Because in that moment, 2 warriors had not fought. They had been seen. The final rune turned silver. Then gold. A pulse of light surged through the trial platform. A heatless flame erupted from the edges of the arena, rising in arc ceremonial fire, bound by ancient circuitry woven into the obsidian. Judges stood one by one, their silence the loudest verdict of all. The trial was complete, and the human had passed. The murmurs started like wind across sand, confused, uncertain, reverent. Some in disbelief, others in approval, a few in quiet outrage. This had never happened. The trial had been designed to test, not to be passed by outsiders. Veyna stepped forward, expression unreadable. No celebration, no protest, just eyes that saw something most hadn't dared to look at. Ceremonial attendant approached Jonah and extended a polished stone disc inlaid with fire thread, the mark of bonded honor. Acceptance of it would elevate him to the first rank of the inner line, a position above all foreign envoys. Jonah took it, felt its weight. Saw how the glow of the crowd wavered around it. And in that flickering space between silence and history, a decision solidified. Jonah stepped forward. No one breathed. Before the high matron and the gathered council, he knelt not in submission, but in reverence, and placed the mark of bonded honor back on the stone platform between them. His voice was clear, not loud, just unwavering. I did not come to rise above. I came to learn. The words echoed through the chamber like a second verdict. This one offered, not imposed. One of the elders shifted. Another narrowed her eyes. A third pressed his hand to his chest in a gesture of withheld praise. The silence thickened, then fractured. Not with dissent, with applause. Not claps, but the Tyr'shai equivalent, a steady stomp of booted heels against volcanic stone. A rhythmic thunder that grew from one circle of judges to the next. Jonah remained kneeling, not because he had to, but because he chose to. The crowd, still silent, watched with something new in their eyes. Not awe, not confusion, not respect. In a culture where honor was often seized, Jonah had done something none had expected. He gave it back. The high matron stepped forward, arms outstretched to silence the room. Her voice carried like a molten spear thrown through air. This is not shame. She looked at Jonah. This is the birth of a second path. One not written in conquest or rank, but in stillness, in reflection, in restraint. Her words would be carved later into stone, into doctrine, into generations. Honor through empathy, courage through restraint. The trial record was updated with a new symbol. Not victory, not defeat. Shared flame. Veyna did not speak. She didn't need to. When Jonah descended the trial platform, she stood beside him. Not ahead, Not behind, not beside, she matched his stride, one beat for every breath. There was no ritual for this, no protocol in the archives. But in the space between them, something old had been rewritten. Not erased, reforged. Together, they walked out of the Temple of Coals, not as challenger and accused, but as something new. Co-authors of a language no one had ever dared to speak. Banners of Earth and Kah'Thera hung side by side, suspended in the high halls of the joint assembly chamber, where air shimmered from the heat vents beneath the obsidian floor. For the first time in recorded history, the diplomatic codices of two civilizations, one born of silicon-fed fires, the other of blue water and ambition, were rewritten not by victors, but by listeners. The Intercultural Protocol Codex was updated under joint seal. The new articles were strange to some, sacred to others. Clauses about bed-use customs, previously unthinkable in official treaty language, were now mandatory reading for every envoy. The term warist became a protected designation. Symbolic. Gestures like offering food or quoting poetry were to be vetted through dual translation. Systems to avoid invoking unintended bonding rights or dueling challenges. Jonah sat silently through the process, flanked by diplomats twice his rank. He didn't speak often. He didn't have to. His name now carried the weight of the codex itself. His actions were ink between the lines, and as revisions scrolled across the joint holoscreen, one phrase stood out among the dense legalese, in recognition that the spaces of intimacy are not universal, but sacred entry requires more than permission. It requires understanding, a law forged not by power, but by firelight and shared breath. Twilight bled across the horizon in long strands of crimson vapor, curling over the domes of the Starforge courtyard. The heatless wind carried the scent of oxidized stone and ash. Jonah stood beside Veyna, but neither filled the silence. There were no protocols for this moment. No translators to clarify what wasn't being said. Only the shifting sky, and the quiet that follows battle when neither side has lost. Veyna held out her hand. In it, the warist pendant glinted like ember metal, its carved glyphs radiating faint pulses of memory silver. A mark of kinship. A symbol never shared lightly. She did not explain. She did not need to. When she placed it in Jonah's palm, her eyes did not meet his. They watched the sky, watched the molten clouds drift, watched the stars behind them begin to flicker. Jonah didn't speak either. His hand closed over the pendant slowly, as if accepting a truth he'd only just now begun to understand. This was not victory. Not alliance. Something else. The kind of farewell that promised nothing, but remembered everything. As night deepened and the fires dimmed, two silhouettes remained unmoved by wind or time. Because not every departure requires a door. Some just need silence loud enough to hold what words never could. Jonah looked down at the pendant resting in his hand. The metal was warm, not from heat, but from history. This wasn't a romantic token. The Tyr'shai had no tradition for casual affection, no word for maybe when it came to bonds. Their language demanded clarity. Their symbols, precision. And this pendant, once worn only by blooded warriors within the same lineage, now sat between two beings who had bled without blades. He raised it with both hands, palms open and unguarded, a gesture not from Earth's. Custom, but drawn from Tyr'shai ritual, a rite of reverence, not claim. He bowed. Not deeply, not in submission. But in acknowledgement. Of the path they had forged, of the fire they had walked, of the ground neither had owned, but both had chosen to stand on. No vows were spoken, but something ancient had shifted. In the stillness after, as the wind tugged gently at his sleeves, Jonah tucked the pendant into his coat, not as a souvenir, but as proof that some spaces are not taken, they are earned. The orbital consulate, station spun in geosynchronous orbit above Kah'Thera Prime, its polished hull catching both starlight and plasma refractions from the planet's stormy magnetosphere. Inside its great hall, Jonah stood alone beneath the human banner. The Star Branch commendation was presented with formal applause and carefully scripted accolades. Media relays broadcast the moment across Earth and her colonies. The official language called him a symbol of strategic humility. The room called him a hero. He let them. He smiled where required, nodded when appropriate. But when the final speech ended and the assembly's hum receded, a soft chime signaled the administrative chamber's final question. Ambassador Jonah. Turin, the voice said, clipped and ceremonial. The United Interstellar Coalition offers you placement in the sole diplomatic corps, any station you choose. Jonah blinked once. No. There was a pause. I respectfully request reassignment. The silence returned. Where? Jonah turned to the viewport. Kah'Thera loomed below half shadow, half stormlight, to the surface. As Earth's first intercultural liaison officer to Kah'Thera Prime, the clerk's stylus hovered in stunned air. No one moved, and then the request was approved. In the official logs, it was processed as a lateral transition. In truth, it was Jonah's clearest declaration yet. I didn't come to conquer. I came to stay. The window of sun stood tall in Veyna's quarters, its crystalline aperture arched toward the heavens, where twin stars drifted like molten lanterns across black velvet. Only war mothers were allowed this view, not for victory, but reflection. Veyna did not sit. She stood with spine straight, arms clasped behind her, and the soft hum of departing thrusters vibrating through the stone beneath her feet. Jonah's shuttle, barely a spark now, had pierced the upper veil of Kah'Thera's sky and vanished into the tapestry of stars. She did not blink. Her left palm hovered near her chest, fingers spread where the worst pendant had once hung for years. The absence felt heavier than its weight ever had. Around her, the chamber remained unchanged. Banners, scrolls, carvings older than her clan's memory. But she felt changed, not defeated, not diminished. Marked by choice, by recognition, by a bond forged not through bloodlines or blades, but through presence. The stars did not answer her thoughts, but they burned a little differently tonight. The chamber of the Temple of Coals was still. The flames beneath its obsidian veins crackled low, as if holding their breath. Veyna's voice did not echo. It didn't need to. He did not conquer us. Not a whisper, not a proclamation. Just a truth set gently upon the air, like a blade laid down by choice. He listened. And in doing so, he carved space into our code, where once there was only stone. Her words would not be remembered in war songs or tactical scrolls, not in trials or duels, but they would remain etched above the sacred entrance to the Temple of Coals, beneath glyphs that once recorded only the names of warriors. A new inscription now shimmered in glass-laced stone. Honor shared is honor multiplied. It did not challenge tradition. It extended it. And for the first time in living memory, the Tyr'shai code of lineage made room for something alien, not submission, not rewriting. Just one new breath. In a house built for silence, above the rust-veiled arc of Mars, the orbital outpost drifted like a forgotten thought. Its panels creaked under solar wind, and its halls buzzed with diplomatic silence. Jonah was older now, not in body, but in the eyes. There were fewer edges in his voice, and more pauses in his breath. The diplomatic courier drone announced itself with a single tone, pure, low, and unfamiliar. No one sent him messages anymore. The crystal it carried was dark violet, etched with a crest he hadn't seen since the day he walked away from Kah'Thera's fire-veined skies. Kar'Sharr. He held it like something fragile, something old, yet freshly alive, encrypted, authenticated, not official. Something personal. He slid the shard into the reader, and the stars outside seemed to slow. The hologram shimmered grainy, imperfect, too real to be synthetic. Veyna stood, in Tyr'shai formal garb, but without armor. Her shoulders relaxed, her breath unhurried, and her eyes, not sharp, not guarded. Just open. If this message finds you beyond orbit, then I trust you still know the difference between a challenge and an invitation. Her tone did not rise or fall. It settled like ash on worn stone. I have vacated my forest. Silence followed, not hesitation, ceremony. If you still claim no offense, a pause that rippled through space and time, you may return. The recording ended. Not with music, not with crest. Just the soft flicker of her image fading, and the sense that something sacred had waited, not to be claimed, but to be met. The locker hissed open. Inside, beneath old coats and folded mission reports, lay the Warist pendant gleaming, like quiet fire, untouched by time. Jonah didn't speak. He didn't need to. He placed it beside his diplomatic case, already packed. One glance toward the viewport, where Mars spun like a memory, beneath steel. No announcement. No fanfare. Just gravity. Not from the planet, but from the message. And a bond still suspended. Not in doubt, but in orbit. Waiting. The shuttle's inner. Lights blinked once. The door sealed shut with the soft finality of choice. No mission log, no diplomatic brief, no parting narration. Only black screen. And then a single heartbeat, not mechanical, not human. Just presence. and a voicer's or his, or maybe both whispered in the dark. Honor travels fastest in silence. Nothing else followed, because some endings aren't endings at all.